6 for Jay Cutler TV, and we have a very special episode today. We don't do Skype very often, but this was actually an idea of mine. I really wanted to do this show. Welcome, Chris Aceto, to the Jay Cutler TV channel. All right.
This is the station we're rooting through down the gauntlet.
Yeah.
Jay was the instigator.
People still ask who Chris Aceto is. What's up with that?
And that's why we're doing this. There you go. So, guys, you guys have worked together for over 20 years, and I really like your story because in a day where it seems like bodybuilders are changing prep coach every 2 shows or so, you guys have had a long-lasting relationship and a long-lasting friendship, and I think it's really, really cool. So I kind of want to go back and to the early days, Jay, when you first started bodybuilding. Everybody knows, you've said many times that you get your first gym membership at 18 years old, you joined the gym, and you started bodybuilding. But how long did it take from that moment on until you actually hooked up with Chris, and how did that happen? Who actually made the introductions?
I actually, I think it was about 6 months or so.
Okay.
When I started training, I kind of learned from some local guys. Actually, Carl Richards, Chris, came to see me in an appearance recently.
Carl Richards.
Remember?
Really?
Yes.
Carl Richards and the Worcester guy, the Italian guy who everyone wanted to look like.
Richie Warfield.
Richard Warfield.
Yeah.
Jay's memory goes, I hate when Trump says, I've got one of the best memory of all time. I said, Jay does. Jay, what's the guy's name, the Italian guy? Jay, Richard Warfield. That's it.
Yeah. So anyway, it's funny because I started getting calls because I started getting big, and I mean Derek Farnsworth can back this up because he was training like 2 towns over, and this guy, they were running this muscle media at the Muscle Mania at the time, and they had like local shows. They were actually like sanctioned shows for like NPC at the time before they went to a different division. But so he had a TV show called American Muscle Magazine, and they would feature like up and coming guys. And basically, he started calling the gym because Derek Farnsworth's like, there's this young kid with a lot of potential. And somehow Chris was intertwined with Lou Zewick, and that's the guy who owned the show. And he asked Chris, I think on several occasions, hey, when you're going through Worcester, make this goal, check this kid out. And that's kind of how we met. Like Chris went out on a whim, and he came and looked at me, and he's like, Chris had already seen like the best of the best. He lived in California, trained the top guys out there. Listen, this show could go on forever because Chris trained a lot of like who's who that people like became big stars like before they were even popular. I mean, Cormiers and all these people like he helped. Paul DeMeo, he was local, and I mean the list goes on and on. But Chris came and looked at me. He put me on like a little diet, and basically then months later came back and said, holy shit, this kid's like transforming like crazy.
All right, Chris, I want to ask you something. What did you think the very first time you met Jay? What was your first impression?
Well, I met him first on the phone, and I realized that he was like organized and persistent. There's a difference between being persistent and a pain in the ass, because I had asked him to call me at a specific time, and he like in 2 weeks or something, and he called me like at a specific time because at the beginning I was trying to blow him off, but Lou Zewick would call and say, this kid's going to call you. Who, by the way, like 3 years later, because this show could go on for like a month, three or 4 years later, I cornered in New York City Lou Zewick, and I said, Lou, when I'm right about something, Jay would tell you, it's like I'm all in and I'm right, period. And I went to Lou Zewick and I saw him because Laura was guest posing at a show that he was promoting somehow, and I said, listen, I'm telling you what, I've been around. I know a lot. I know almost everything. And this guy is like built to be Mr. Olympia. And I mean, not only be Mr. Olympia physically, but be Mr. Olympia like as somebody who lifts the sport up. And Jay was like 20. Wow. You know what I mean? And I said, what I would do, he said, what do you think I should do? I'm dead serious. I said, I would sign him like now to like 100 a year, 125 a year, 150. He was like 20 or 20. I know he hadn't competed in California yet. And so that was, that's a reflection. I mean, people know Jay now, right? They'll say, oh, yeah, well, that's Jay. That is who Jay has become. True, right? Like a leader. But, he had that quality when he was 18, 19, 20. So, not much has changed. I think I told you, Jay's living in Vegas now with the office and the nice house and successful. he was successful at like 19 with the Eustace Street apartment and like the little office there and the kitchen organized and training schedule organized. You know, he was ready to go. So when Jay's given like instructions to Roden and saying, listen, you got to live the part. You got to think, you know, you got to eat, sleep, and breathe becoming Mr. Olympia, but you got to do it in your head and you got to do it in the gym and you got to live it and you got to believe it. It's just not like talk. And, you know, I'm getting way ahead, but the weird thing about Roden is he's always regurgitated, spit out that conversation that he had with Jay, but he believed it. You know what I mean? It's not like he just went to the gym and trained and didn't believe it, or he believed it but didn't. I mean, that he trained and didn't believe it, or that he believed it and didn't do the physical part. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So the prescription was there.
Jay, let me ask you something. You said many times that you didn't, when you first started, at least you didn't aspire to become Mr. Olympia. That wasn't in the card for you. But why were you so diligent and why were you so focused on bodybuilding at that time, at such a young age?
Well, listen, my goal was to be the best, and I always was challenged, right? I love challenges. That's why, I continue to do all this crazy stuff when I really don't have to, right? But as far as you're wasting your time doing this, you know? And I'm like, man, I need challenge, you know? And I mean, the Mr. Olympia was the biggest challenge biggest obstacle I'll ever go through in my life. Even though Chris would tell you, oh, he was bred for it. It didn't mean I didn't have a long road ahead, right? We looked at every show as like a stepping stone, and we didn't get ahead. And I think really, like Chris, he totally pushed me to like, hey, you know, you can financially support yourself in this thing. And that became like the challenge is like, you know, I started that little mail order and the websites. I mentioned this the other day, I think, in our little walking video. But like Chris was kicking ass at the time, doing like residual money off all the like everything you could from bodybuilding, merchandising. He was doing the camps, he was doing books. And back then, I mean, listen, we're talking like, this is like back when people read books other than digital online, right? So like there was a lot of information and I'm spitting information like now social media, like you can see what guys are doing, like a Reagan Grimes and all these guys always in California. Like no one knew I was underground. So like when I came out, people were like, holy shit, who is this guy? What is he about? And they wanted to learn more about it, but the only outlet they had was the magazines. So I looked at the exposure. Listen, I wanted to be somebody, truly. I wanted to land the cover of Muscle and Fitness. Like that was a dream. Like when you land a Muscle and Fitness, that's like winning the Mr. Olympia. And to do that at 21, and Chris was introducing me to like the popular people in the business. I mean, Chris is the one. Shortly after we met, remember, I mean, this is beyond the 2-hour rides to Maine every week. And he'll tell you, I would go up there, drive 2 hours. I would literally take my clothes off. Didn't want to cut into Chris's time. And that's what he thought. I expected that the guy was busy, right? And I would take my clothes off. I would basically, you know, pose for him and he'd switch my diet maybe for like 2 minutes. And I would sometimes I would eat a meal and get on the road, or I would just say, okay, I'm out of here. And I would leave. I literally stay for sometimes 10 minutes and I'd get back in my car and drive 2 hours back. And
wow,
who else was dedicated to do that? That was my day off from the gym. So 4 hours alone driving, you know, the 10 minutes at his house, and I would be back in Worcester doing my thing. But, you know, he told me about a misprint in the USA Today newspaper. And I had the chance to go train at Gold's Gym for the first time in California because we flew round trip, Kerry and I, for $99 on American Airlines. And I remember I called up until midnight and they had to honor that. And they said, oh, it's a misprint. I said, well, Chris is like, don't let them tell you that you can't. You know, I missed a budget over there. So I called up till midnight and finally I got through at like 11, like 39. And they were, 11:59. And I was like, hey, you have to honor this. They're like, yeah. So I got 2 round trip tickets, went to Gold's Gym Venice, got to see the USA in '93. He was helping, what's his name, DeMeo for that show. And Chris Cormier won, and I got to see like Wheeler and all. That's when I met Ed Connors, and man, the rest is history. I mean, it was awesome. It was just like, that was my whole like start of my career pretty much.
What did it mean to you that someone you know, because Chris, like you said, was well established, believed so much in you? I'm sure that gave you a lot of confidence, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it gave me confidence, but you know, and he wasn't. Don't get me wrong. Like he sits there and he says, "Oh man, Jay had it," but he didn't tell me this. He wasn't like, "Oh, you're the best. You're this, that." we just were like, okay, you got work to do. And I mean, he was helping Mike Francois at the time. That was like the craziest amateur you've ever seen. Like Mike Francois, if he was in the amateur ranks today, I mean, he wouldn't even have to really show up. You know what I mean? Because he would win at 70% of what he was. But it was so stiff. Like he was getting second and not winning. And then when he won, he went into the pros and did damage. You know, you don't see that anymore. Yeah, I mean, he was a beast. And so he's comparing, like I'd take my clothes off up there and pose for him. And then Mike would be there, 2 days later, flying out from Ohio to see Chris. And he'd be like, oh, okay, this is what real shit is, right? And I was trying to get to that level. So he was, how impressed can he really be? But he knew that the tools were there. Let's put it that way.
Chris, well, the tools, because the tools without the follow through is nothing. Yeah. Jay will tell you, how many people have we seen, with the tools with no follow through? The follow through, and the thing is, people can follow through 95%. And if you follow through 95%, if you got the tools, yeah, you're top 8 in Mr. Olympia. But you got to follow through not 100, but like 101. That separates the guy getting 8th between,
Yeah, and honestly, I'll speak this. Mike Francois was, if that guy didn't get sick, he really could have potentially been the guy.
Yeah.
He was that good.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Because he was dedicated. That's the difference. He was trained. He trained. And these people nowadays don't train. Like, compared to that, like, he was just at another level.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, Jay. I wanted to ask you, Chris, you've seen so many people, you've trained so many people, you've been in the game for so long. What would you say the biggest difference now versus then is in bodybuilding?
Well, people switch prep coaches because they're looking for, quote, protocols. Jay will tell you, I don't even know what a protocol is. You know what I mean? Or so, the people looking for, ways to grow outside of just basic training and basic nutrition. And it's like, Jay, how many get rich quick gimmicks do people approach you with a year? It's the same nonsense. You know what I mean? It's the same mindset, like shortcuts.
Straight out, Chris, because people on this channel we never talked about drugs.
Yeah.
We never talked about drugs.
No, because it was like, Jay, there was this understanding that Jay was wide with flat pecs. And really, if you saw him in real life, you'd say your pecs are great. You know what I mean? Or you'd say like, you'd see, someone would see him in real life and say your back is great, but not really because it's so wide. So, the solution was not, gee, Jay, maybe you should shoot your pecs. It was like, you do inclines. What do? You do flats. You do, maybe you should bring your body weight up. And if you bring your body weight up, maybe your pecs will fill out, and that's, people who know me now, of course, I was on Dave's show the other day. I don't know how many times I've been on there and someone said, like, mention about protocols. And I said, well, no one can have, it just, bodybuilding's taken to some degree gone off the rails in terms of what you need to do to build a, Mr. Olympia physique.
Well, I think these days also because of social media, because everything is so accessible, because the meal prep companies and all that stuff. Jay says, and not in a million years in the past, you would have actually.
I can't even imagine Jay letting someone cook his food. Other than someone in the house where he can see it.
I cooked. Chris would come stay with me when I was fucking 19, and I would cook Chris's meals. You don't understand. Chris was like 240, man. Chris would come in the gym, we'd train, and he was bigger than I was at the time.
Jay would finish. I told
competing then.
I told Palumbo I said I'd go down to Jay's house, and Jay would get up like really early, and you'd hear the pans flying and cooking, and everything would be like a gourmet meal, right, Jay?
Yeah.
And then he'd cook like a meal for me, him, and if anyone else was there. And then I asked Dave, I said, what do you think Jay would be thinking about after finishing that meal and cleaning up, because Jay's a clean nut, right? So I'd have to clean everything up. Yeah, and Dave said, without missing a beat, well, exactly what to cook for meal 2 and 3. Yeah. I said, that's exactly it. So you couldn't run around much either. You had to be close to home because Jay would always cook, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd cook my stuff fresh. Like, I'd be
that's
like,
what I mean.
We need to stay in distance, because I eat every 2 hours, man. Like, he had me on like 6 or 7 meals a day.
Wow.
And I didn't miss, man. Like, I'd go to the butcher shop. I'd go to Adam's Rib and buy all that beef and everything. And I was buying the whole cow at the time. I'd have he asked him, my fridge was full of eggs. And I mean, we'd eat our meals and he'd sit on the couch. He'd pass out on the couch. He slept half the day when he was over, You know what's funny is Chris would come and like, he was my coach, or like, I hate the word coach because I never called him my coach. Like that was just a term he didn't use. He was like my buddy, he's like my brother, but, he would never look at me or anything. He'd just be like, okay, let's go to the gym and train. He didn't say, oh, how do you look? Or he didn't give it, like, we didn't have that. It was like, okay, I know Jay's progressing. I don't even need to see what he looks like. You know what I mean?
Because if you progress by the week for like 4 years, you progress by the week. So if you're right, you'd be like, that might have, there was a 3-year period, right, Jay? Where, did you not feel like you were growing at every second of the day?
I remember when I showed up at Nationals and everyone's like, who the hell is this guy? Like,
yeah. When you showed up at Nationals, the year Mike won.
Yeah.
I think, and so I actually, this is a true story. Once I told Bob Paris when I was working with Cormier, I gave him a physical description of Cormier. Physical. Like, he's really good, balanced, not the biggest guy, blah, blah, blah. And me and Bob Paris were in the Gold's Gym parking lot, and walking up the street was Chris Cormier, and Bob goes, oh, here's Cormier. I'm like, how do you know? He said, has to be. Just has to be. It's the way you described him. So Mike won the Nationals that year, and I had described him to
describe me to Mike. Yeah.
To Mike, and what did Mike come up to you and say? Hey, Jay.
Yeah, well, I came walking up the same thing, and he's like, "Oh, here's Jay."
Yeah, and I'm like, "How did you?" Yeah, I said, "How do you know?" And he said, "It fits the exact description."
You must be very descriptive. You said, yeah. So sometimes you would go to Jay. Sometimes you would come to your house, but you would come to his farm. He was living on the farm at the time. And then you tell me he had animals all over the house. Tell me, that's a funny story, man. Tell me that story.
That was the first time he came, actually.
Yeah, that was when. Okay, how did I find it? Because there's no GPS or like MapQuest.
No, you used there was like write down directions, left, right.
Yeah.
10 miles on this.
And Jay's perfect directions, right? It's like to a T.
Hey,
you'll see a tree, and at that tree is like a right.
I gotta say something. Chris logged all the miles on his car. He had a notebook.
Tax deductions.
In his car. It was like a little notebook, and he would log down, okay, I drove this many miles, because he was so like, he had to log it for his taxes, because it was a business thing.
That was a business trip to go see Jay Cutler.
he made you who you are. This is the way you are now, Jay.
What car was that, Jay?
That was
the green Bostonian. Yeah. I used to think it was like a Bentley.
No, it was that one that got buried in the rain.
In the rainstorm. But it was the green Bentley. I forget not a Bentley, green Bostonian something special edition. People used to think it drove really nice.
Yeah.
Didn't drive as good as your Buick, Jay.
Yeah.
But so I go to Jay's house and he had the he lived in the bay.
That was 93 or something. That was like before I won Teen Nationals.
Yeah, and he was in the bay. He goes, well, you're gonna, when you see the farm, and then like I guess call me or something, and pull up, and there's gonna be like a lot of there'll be some geese out there or something. So I pull up the car, and like the car was like my Bentley, right? I swear it was like, it was, I forget the name of it, and it was like a big giant sedan, and I pull up. And I hear and like tons, hundreds of geese come, and I'm like, they're coming near the car. They all go like this, and they land on every ounce of every part of the car was completely covered.
Oh my God.
And Jay comes out like, oh, it's no big deal. They'll be okay. And so I was with Laura, right? And we walked to the basement apartment, and every single one of those. The geese, they all followed us. And Jay's like, get out of here. And he's kicking them and shoving them off. And like, you have to open up the door, and he said, like, come in quickly or they'll come in. And then we went in.
Have that video,
and then what was it? That's what you were eating, right? Geese eggs.
Wow.
He was eating those eggs.
Yeah,
dude. That was the protein.
Yeah, my dad would pick the geese eggs in the morning and leave them in cartons for me at like 5, 6 in the morning.
Fresh.
I never told Jay. But when I was there, he was like proud because it was like first apartment, right? But in my mind, I was like, I just can't wait till he gets like something better than this. I just can't wait for him to.
It was a shithole, Dave. It was a dump.
It was a shithole, but I didn't want to say like, hey, this is a shithole because
Yeah.
right, your first car or everything that's your first, you're proud of because this is a step up. So instead of saying this is a shithole, I remember, I swear, I was taking a leak and thinking like, I can't wait till he gets out of here.
Yeah. And then I moved to Eustis Street after that.
Oh, that was like moving. That was like a big jump. That was if you had, that was where a lot of things happened,
It's kind of cool that, Jay, you had the chance to see all the people he was working with. He was telling me, Chris was telling me a story where he was actually looking at the Mayo. You happened to be there at the same time. Tell me that story, Chris. That was a good one.
So I think the Mayo I remember it like yesterday, dude.
Olympia,
I had the crazy house on the ocean.
Yeah, I think Chris had a beautiful condo, man. It was like right on the water, and
wow.
And I went up there, like, we showed up at the same time, which really, we didn't really, Paul wasn't the type of guy he wanted anyone to see him. Like, he was very, like, he was a pessimist, kind of, you know what I mean? He was my idol, but, like, he was like, I don't want to see that guy, I don't want to, but he was training for the 95 Olympia then, right?
Wow.
And so surprising, and I didn't really know what to do. And so, of course, there's, I know exactly how it went down. Jay sat in the picture window. Quietly went to the picture window. It's like right on the beach. I mean, and I had Paul pose me in the kitchen, and he looked good, and but Jay, I'll tell you what my impression of what was going through Jay's head is like, this is the 95% guy, because that the 5% pessimism, is what's going to separate you from, because really, Paul's another guy who could have been a Mr. Olympia without a doubt. And if I could chop off Jay's head and put it on Paul's body, we might be doing the interview right now with, Chris and Paul and Dave and not Jay Cutler. Because, I mean, Paul was phenomenal. And you know what, really, what Paul did to look phenomenal with the protocols, it was so, it's the same thing. We never talked about the shit, and it was little. And, but Jay stayed, in that picture window while I dealt with Paul, and the different vibe. And I consider Paul a tremendous guy and a good friend, a wonderful person. But the vibe differences, Jay had already had in his mind the goals written out, and he knew the path to get there, and he knew there were going to be obstacles. And if there are obstacles, he's going to figure out, when he gets to those, how do I get around them to get to where I want to go? Paul also had, though it wasn't written in concrete, Jay's was written in concrete. Paul's was like written on water, where he wanted to go to, like Mr. Olympia, how he was going to achieve that. But the difference is, and I don't mean this to sound negative about Paul, but when obstacles would present themselves, instead of trying to find a way to get around them to get to your goal, or to use them as how can I learn from it to get to my goal? Because nothing's easy. Those obstacles would break him down. And I could get the vibe from Jay listening to the conversation. Jay looked out at the ocean. I'd like look over to see what Jay was doing. Maybe he'd look up, look at a side view of me looking at Paul pose. But that was my impression, that Jay was digesting that conversation. And, he also could get that little pessimistic vibe. And, it's okay to have some pessimism as a person. I mean, I certainly do. But your optimism has to totally overwhelm your pessimism, or you're through, no matter what you're trying to accomplish. And Dave, by being around Jay, and you, I mean, Jay shares that, Coleman shares that, Dorian shares that, that quality of like, okay, there's something in my path. Well, I don't really care.
Yeah. Jay, I'm sure as you were coming up the rank and you started, doing well and people knew who you were more and more, you probably got approached by many other coaches or, prep guy telling them, oh, I can make you win, I can be better. Did that ever happen? Did you ever, and what did you stick with Chris the whole time?
No, what's funny is that no one ever approached me because no one was doing it really. No one was, we didn't have, I hate to use the word too, because it just annoys me, but gurus, right?
Yeah.
We heard about people, oh, this guy's helping, but no one really had that job as a coach. I mean, remember, no one had contact really. We started email started when we were working together. Like you would send Polaroid pictures, we would send FedEx, like Chris, I remember taking pictures and being like, okay, I can't adjust your diet till tomorrow. I'd run to the hour development, FedEx the pictures over. And then he'd get them and he'd be like, oh, the lighting's not good. Can you retake them? I mean, it was difficult. And that was before digital cameras, Dave. So like you were going off a picture when I was living, that was when I moved to California, and then Chris would come out and stay with me the last week. But listen, at the time, Chris Aceto didn't work with anyone else.
That's right.
With me. I remember the time we were I remember Chris sitting in my little kitchen in that little desk area when I lived on Tesoro Drive, the first house in Vegas.
Yeah.
I remember looking, I was corresponding with Victor Martinez at the time, and I said, Chris, you should really help this guy out. And Chris is like, really? You think I should? And I'm like, dude, he's like, you wouldn't mind or whatever. And I'm like, no, and Chris wasn't like doing it for financial, like he wasn't like, oh, I can go make money, because he was already making money doing all these other things anyway. So like there wasn't that financial aspect. And then once people got a hold of like, oh my gosh, I can help someone for money, that's when the gurus and the people trainers started coming out of the woodwork. But listen, I hate to like talk about this, but I remember, Chris, how can I pay you? He's like, don't worry, it will come. He never asked me for $1.
All these geese eggs. Give me the geese eggs.
All this time, he never asked me for one thing. The only thing Chris did for me, he did my diet. He helped me get deals. He taught me business. I remember, we were all under Weider contract at the time. We would talk about like, okay, let's get this supplement, that supplement. I mean, he would always try to approach people like, sign this guy. He's the next guy.
Wow.
He always helped me with the business deals, but never once. And I can tell you, till the end of time, Chris Aceto never asked me for $1. Even when we did shows and I was winning Arnold Classics, Olympia, there was never, oh, you have to pay me this or that. He was just like, hey, here's a check. And that was never spoke about.
I'm gonna invoice you. I tried to take I tried to take 0.01% of Jay's net worth, and it came up to be like 10 million. So I don't know.
Guys, we're approaching 30 minutes. There's one more question I want to ask you, Chris, because I think it's a good one. Jay has told me several times when you guys first working together and he would be on a prep diet for 16 weeks, not once he would ever cheat on his diet. There would be no burger. There would be not one cheat day the entire time. That correct?
I can't even listen. Okay, we're gonna have to break the 30-minute mark. One, I get an email from someone today. I sent him a diet, and he says, "Where are the cheat meals?" I said, "Dude, you have to get into. You haven't even been on the thing one day." So we just went through like New Year's and Christmas, and there's some bodybuilders I'm helping, right? And people are like, well, I'm gonna need a cheat meal on Christmas and Christmas Eve, and Boxing Day is this, and then New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. I'm like, holy shit,
That's a whole.
I can't even keep track. So I thought of Jay, and I might have told you.
I know where this is going, Chris.
You told me, Chris. You told me.
Okay, because I said, wait a minute, Jay would do this. Jay would be like, okay, this is Jay. All right, all these guys I'm gonna beat eventually through hard work. They're all going to take Christmas Eve and Christmas Day to cheat. So those days, I'll do 2 hours of cardio and keep my carbs down to like 50. And then New Year's Eve, I'll get into bed at like 7. And I'll get up on New Year's Day and do like a 95 set back workout at 8 a.m. And he'd do the opposite.
Yeah.
It's contrary.
Let me ask you this though, Chris, because so many, and I know some of you guys are doing the same thing. Now you do actually allow some of your guys you're helping.
Yeah, but nobody ate 1,000 carbs a day, dude. I mean, nobody was doing.
You would never do that in the past. Why the change? What's the theory behind it?
Well, I mean, you got to work with the person's body, but I mean, sometimes Jay would, cheat meals is different. They can be like a mental thing for people. People need a mental break. And I don't think, Jay, if I said, Jay, you need to just eat eggs and that's it for 16 weeks. There's no carbs. There's going to be 2 hours of cardio a day and you'll get to where you want to go. I don't think it would ever enter his brain like, oh, no, I can't do that.
Let me tell you, intervene. First of all, Chris's diet to me, you want to laugh, it would be, okay, 50 carbs, 40 protein. He never said to me, eat this kind of protein, this kind of carbs. Like it was basically 6 meals or 7 meals. And he would do, okay, this many carbs, no fat, like nothing, like we didn't include fat in the diet. He would just send me one sheet that he said, okay, today you're going to eat, on meal 2, you're going to eat 100 carbs, 50 grams of protein. Meal 3, you're going to eat 75 grams. He never said, because he knew I wasn't going to sit there and eat donuts and shit. You know what I'm saying? So it was just very, very simplistic. And he would argue with me. I remember we'd sit on the phone and he'd be like, you have to have a cheat meal. And I'd be like, Chris, I can't. And he'd be like, just go have something. So I go.
Yeah, Jay would say, I made my burger.
What did you eat? And I'd be like, oh, I went to the grocery store. I got like 96% lean beef. And I had, like, no bread on it. And man, like this guy, like I'm telling him to cheat on his diet. He won't cheat because I wanted to win so bad. He'll tell you, like, I would be like, whatever it takes. I never complained. I never really argued other than we would argue about, Jay, you're doing too much. Like, don't.
Yeah,
you don't have
absolutely.
6 hours of cardio a day,
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
That's the only thing we'd argue about is, you got to cut back.
Yeah, because I would just be like, I'm gonna be the best ever. You know what I mean? This is gonna be my best of all time. So it's pretty wild how it worked. But yeah, I understand. Like it did change. The last year we worked together, 13. For my comeback year, which. Listen, if I had ample time, I would have been a lot better. I think we could have done a lot more. And I really regret that we did it I chose 13 instead of 14 because that was a 50th anniversary. I talk about regrets and what I do, but I really needed more time. And he would tell you, like, the transition was amazing during that time of the comeback. But I think that time, like, it was weird because I hadn't worked with him in a couple years. And now that's when we started eating the burgers for the cheat day, which things have just changed now. I think his diets are a little different. We're eating muffins and, before, like we didn't have, I was eating more bagels and stuff during, my Olympia preps and, that was kind of off diet. But, he used to always say, Jay, you have to do opposite of what everyone else does. Because if I followed the protocol of like low carbs and high protein and, in the 2 hours of cardio a day, my body would just disintegrate to nothing.
Jay used to lie to people. He used to tell me, Chris, I'm lying to people. So people ask, the reason I just don't have the energy to explain to people. I'm like, what are you talking about? He'd be like, well, like, he talked to like XYZ bodybuilders, and they're doing like 50 carbs and 2 hours of cardio, and really high protein. And Jay would be on like, 15 minutes of cardio, 1,000 carbs, and complete, not opposite. I mean, I need a bigger word than, opposite. Polar opposite.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And instead of trying to explain to people, he would just say, yeah, me too. I'm doing 50.
It's faster.
I mean, listen, he would send me a diet every day and it'd be like 1,000 carbs, 1,200 carbs, 1,000 carbs, and I'd still eat, 300 grams of protein. And I didn't question it because I'm like, man, I looked in the mirror and I was 280 and I was lean, I was holding water, but he's like, screw the water. Who cares? It's come out at the end. And, that was our diet. Some of the shows we dieted for. Oh, on Olympia was like people, you wouldn't even believe the diet.
Where did we eat the week before? Do you remember?
We ate everything we could. We ate at that all-you-can-eat sushi buffet.
With ice cream.
Yeah.
7 days out.
I mean, they'd eat frozen yogurt every night. Like, we'd be like, oh, let's go. He's like, let's go to that yogurt place so you can load up on yogurt. I mean, I was like 290 a week out from that Olympia, We got to Vegas and just like, and then we stripped down and it was like, I presented probably the best package I ever did, Wow. But there was no question. He's like, you're going to kill these guys. Like the whole time. I never saw him more confident than 01. I mean, I remember showing up. We went to Vegas a week before and I was so big. And everyone's like, this guy's, no one saw it coming. And once I got down and everyone's like, I remember telling Lonnie Teeper in the elevator, like, I'm going to win this thing. And he's like looking at me like I got 16 heads, And, and then I show up on stage and of course get called numbers next to Coleman. And that's really when I stood there, it was like, like next level shit, you know?
Yeah, that was the loudest prejudging in the history of prejudging.
Oh.
Yeah, Chris.
Because people were seeing something that they didn't know would happen, and it was the unexpected. And then when they were seeing it, the crowd got behind Jay for that prejudging, and it was like deafening. I remember Mannion having to scream at the top of his lungs, on a microphone, like abs and thigh, because he couldn't hear. People couldn't hear over the.
And that was at Mandalay Bay, but it's funny. I came off backstage and Chris was crying, like he's like, "Fuck, you did it,"
Well, I was crying because I had cancer too, and I'm like, I will never. I thought I might die, so I was like, fuck.
He told me a year before that we were on the European tour and we finished, and I got second to Coleman at 2 shows, and he's like, "Mark my words, you're gonna win the Mr. Olympia next year."
Next year. I said that. I said, quote, mark my words. And that's what I told Dave. Jay, do you remember I had 2 friends who came to visit in England to see the show. And one of the guys goes, Jay came off the stage, and the guy goes, oh, in his British accent, "Oh, Jay, nice to meet you." Thin guy, skinny guy, and stupendous, just absolutely fabulous. Bravo. He said, "Clearly the winner. You should have won." And Jay's like, these judges, they got a lot of experience and they got a good eye. They have great eyes. And the guy says, "Did you tell him what? I forgot what my friend did for a job." He said, Did you tell Jay what I do for a job?" He says, "I teach eye surgeons how to do surgery."
Yeah.
He's a professor and he teaches. He says, "I think I know what I'm talking about." Jay, we laughed at that, huh?
Yeah, that was crazy.
But that was 2000. I said, on that tour.
On the English Grand Prix tour, yeah.
Mark my words. If it was an Instagram story, I would have been up there with like a million, with my camera. Mark my words,
Yeah, you're great at predicting things. Chris, I want to ask you this question in closing real quick. I asked Jay recently what he thought his all-time best look was competitively on stage. I'm going to ask you the same question. What do you feel was his best look ever?
Well, I'll break it down this way. I think there's 3 there's lots of stupendous looks, right? People get confused because, there's not a lot of cameras around and back in the day. And, I'll say this, a lot of people, talk about people's condition now. And, I do real estate. You take pictures to show an apartment that it doesn't really look like that. You know what I mean? It doesn't. And versus if you just use a camera that they were using 10, 12 years ago, bodybuilders, you don't collect the detail. I don't know if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So I would say if you backtrack, there was I could tell you every exact contest, exactly what Jay looked like everywhere. But 01, of course, was phenomenal. And if you need proof of that, if you're not 100% sure, keep in mind he's standing next to Coleman. Right. So it's not like, no insult, it's not like he's standing in the lineup in 2018. He's not standing next to Bonac and Ramy.
Yeah.
Does that make, you know what I mean?
Of course.
So there's a difference.
Of course.
If you go and you look at the video or pictures from like the day after, like Jay's pecs, I mean, that's no one has pec striations like that these days.
Yeah.
So that was a tremendous look. First Ironman was a phenomenal look. I can attest to that by, pictures and being there.
03 Ironman, yeah.
Yeah, and was it 02 or 03? First
03.
Ironman. 03. And I remember like Jay came out and he was just so big and so stupid. And I thought, because he was so big, I'm like, I remember seeing like being a little confused. Him standing there and like Milos was like 3 seats away. And Jay's peeled. I'm like, he is? I was like thinking he's way too big to be peeled. You know what I mean? And then that Arnold too. That Arnold was a rugged look, and I think he was like in the 270s there, one of those Arnolds. And
02. Yeah.
I wasn't
after
like,
01 Olympia.
When he checked his weight, it was like 273 or 271, and
Chris was so scared, like at the weight. He's like, "Don't weigh yourself anymore because it's just too much."
Yeah, I said, we just can't. It's just gonna play with my head. And then I remember Jay coming back to the room, and he had like a smug look on his face. And I guess he had posed for Lonnie Tieper, and Lonnie Tieper passed out. And I think Jay lied about his weight, right? You said like I'm 259, because if he said he was 273, Lonnie would say, you're off. And so Jay came back to the room, hit his Christmas tree, and I'm like, I just did the math. I'm like, that at 273. I said, yeah, that's a slam dunk. You know, 09 condition was phenomenal. Tremendous look, of course. I would put that realistically behind those other looks in the context of the weight does count for something, size.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know people have a meltdown, but, you know, you're beating Branch and Dexter. It's different than standing next to Coleman. I mean, the biggest, you know, the crazy thing about the Olympia is it used to be a two-man show for so long. It was like this weird Coleman, Cutler, you know, show, and it lasted from 01 to, you know, 06.
True. I love it. Well, guys, we're over 40 minutes now. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to come on today. We'll have to have you back, Chris, because there's so much more to tell. But I think this gives you a fan a good idea of your relationship, your friendship. And I'm so glad you guys are still friends. I'm so glad that Jay actually used you for his last year in 13. I think it's great that he started his career with you and ended it with you. And thank you so much for doing this, guys. I appreciate it. All right.
Thanks, Dave.
All right. Thanks, Big J.
Thanks.